just because someone goes to prison and they've done something terrible, they don't lose all of their intelligence and their internal resource. So let's put that to really good use. And I have a vision of taking some lifers through this, and then when they come out of prison through the gate into jobs on the housing estates, doing that work with the young people before the young people get involved. Because, as I said, once they've got involved, it's very hard to get out. It's very tangled.
Well, good luck, Maria. And there are good people, even though they may have served long prison sentences, who really deliver back to their communities. And of course, they have huge credibility because of what they've been through. So they are absolutely part of the solution. We shouldn't look at them as a lifelong part of the problem. So that's, one segment of a big discussion about how to improve things. And, let's come back, I suppose, at the end to this court modernisation bill. It is a good thing that we have a government that's looking at this and has modernisation in mind. It's not a bad thing. The reason we are where we are is because the system's been starved for too long. So we want a government that's prepared to look at this. It's just the way they do it, and their selection of changes and how much money they're going to put behind it that is the really important thing here. And I'm sure that, the leaders of the legal professions would say, we want positive change. We'd like to work with you, the government, to create that change. But we don't want crude measures that are going to impinge on people's rights, like jury trial, if they don't make much difference to the backlog that we're all rightly obsessed with. So that's where the detail of the conversation needs to come from. And it'll be very interesting to watch. It's no longer my job, but I'm watching with real interest, as we all should.
And then, of course, you have the further problem, which is, you can have a great initiative and people can get behind it, but things take so long that then you get a change of government or a change of minister, and then it's like a game of snakes and ladders. I mean, I think the country is incredibly fortunate to have James Timpson as a prisons minister, but he's not going to be there forever.
Yeah.
Um,
I completely agree with you. And I'm not being funny. I almost lost count in my 5 years as DPP with the number of prime ministers, the number of Lord Chancellors, the number of attorney generals, the number of home secretaries. There were so many of them. I think in terms of Lord Chancellors or Secretaries of State for Justice, there were six, and that's if you don't count one who was appointed twice. So that's more than one a year. And if you have no continuity, then you can't make a difference. Bring in a real subject matter specialist, and James Timpson is one of those. He's proved that over decades. That is the sort of person, leave politics and the color of the party to one side. That is the sort of person who, if they're given a chance, will make a positive change. And so, to that extent, we need continuity. We don't need constant chopping and changing.
Wow, yeah. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I think, we're coming to a natural end of, we could open up 1,000 subjects, I expect. We could do a whole series. Um, but I do have a final question for you, a sort of surprise question, if you like. And that is, if you were to be given the keys to the Ministry of Justice and you could make one change immediately, what change would you make?
Well, that's a really good question. I think what I'd say is I'm going back to where I come from. Where I come from is a lawyer. Never mind whether I prosecute or defend. I'm interested in delivering justice. You're a cog in that wheel. And you only deliver that through the work of a lot of people. But in particular, the focus is on the courts and the legal profession and the judiciary and the buildings to conduct those trials. We had an organization which had sole responsibility for that, and it was called the Lord Chancellor's Department. And that was disbanded and then rebuilt into what we now call the Ministry of Justice. And the problem with that, this might be controversial, but this is my view, is that where you give a single budget to a government department, but that budget has to stretch across all sorts of different areas. It's always going to be a question of choice as to who gets the money. And what's happened in justice terms, I think, is that the prisons, the prison estate, the physical prisons, and the numbers in prison have become such a problem that they are effectively sucking money out of the budget that the Ministry of Justice has. And that means that money's not available for that sharp end, namely the courts, the judiciary, and the lawyers. And given that that same budget also has to support the probation system, you can see you've got at least a three-way tug of war. So if I was asked, you know, what kind of change, I wouldn't necessarily recreate a Lord Chancellor's department. It's sort of old-fashioned language. I'm not fussed about that. But I would want a dedicated organisation and a dedicated budget to do what is needed to make sure that we have lawyers tomorrow. We have funding for those lawyers to act for people who don't have money of their own, but who need a guiding hand through a complicated criminal justice system. And we have money for the judges of tomorrow and the courts of tomorrow. And if that could be done as a single funding stream, which we all recognized is so necessary, that is the change I'd make. There are a lot of other questions, such as, okay, where would prisons go? Who'd look after that? Where would probation go? I'm not saying they're not important, but I have witnessed firsthand the erosion of our courts, the leaky roofs, the lifts that don't work, the lawyers who've been on the same rate of pay for 20 years when they turn up to defend somebody who really needs that defense. And if you don't invest, then the whole system degrades. So that's the change I'd make. And you can call that special pleading because I'm a lawyer. I don't care what you call it. I think unless we give support where it's really needed, we're not going to dig ourselves out of this hole. So that's the best answer I can give.